Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another podcast, Self Employed, the Forgotten Community. How you position yourself when you're self employed is really important. And for me, I think one of the biggest problems that I struggled with was how to explain what I did and how I positioned myself. Even how I spoke to clients really was important. And when you're self-employed, you don't have a sales team. You are the message. And if that message isn't clear, everything becomes harder. We're joined today by Karissa Higgins from 360 Clarity Communication. Good afternoon or good morning, Karissa, for wherever you are in the world.
Hi there. How are you, Jens?
Oh, Dan, oh,
Two Dan, the two Dan.
Carissa, maybe we can start with you. I know when I became self-employed back over 35 years ago, we didn't have emails to worry about, but obviously the fact that you were answering the phone and you were pitching for work and you were handling objections, communication really sort of became your reputation. Do you find that still today when you're dealing with self-employed people, and what sort of struggles do you see them have over communication?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a really, really good central question because the most fascinating thing about communication in the way that we operate as a self-employed people is that it hasn't changed. The fundamentals of communication haven't changed since those days, certainly since, you and I started our businesses many decades ago, that fundamentally the messaging, regardless of whether you're speaking on the phone or in the old days, typing and then faxing out a press release or a fax memo, to today where we're actually going online with social media or sending an email or whatever it is, the channel may have changed slightly. So we've gone from fax and now we might be to email, or we might have gone from a press release in the newspaper, which obviously still exists today, but we've got a lot more channels through social media and what have you. So the digital has become prevalent in our lives, but fundamentally the communication principles haven't changed, and the absolute importance of getting your message right from the very beginning and understanding how that is inextricably linked to your core business strategy. And that very much remains the same since certainly I started my business and was consulting to people, back in the late 90s.
Yeah, Dan, we speak an awful lot in Bridge Link about people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I think today we could also say they buy what they understand. And, from a clear communications when it comes to trust, I think you'd agree with that, building trust faster and positioning yourself and positioning your values is really, really important.
I would say so. And I love what Carissa said there, because I never thought of it that way. That, you know, our channels, it's there are more channels now, there are different channels, or, fax machine. Now, I don't know what age you are, guys, but Jesus, fax machines.
I can't remember Alex machines, Dan.
I do. I remember pigeons, for God's sake. Um, but I was told there one time that nowadays it's never been easier to get your message out there, but it's never been harder to get someone to listen because there's now so many channels. And the same challenge is there for self-employed people. Lazy communication, broad stroke
Mm.
marketing that just throws something out there and they hope something sticks. And I think there should be, and Carissa, you're really good at this. There should be a more of a realization. Hold on a minute now. What exactly am I doing? Why am I doing it? Who am I doing it for? You know, and like the why, when Simon Sinek did that now famous TED talk on people done by what you do, there by why you do it. The reason was that it became such a hit that it hit a spot that people now realize, hold on a minute, I need to be more pointed in my messaging. I need to target the people that I want to target. And I think that's where we're at. This broad stroke marketing just doesn't work anymore because the amount of, like Carissa, you said, the amount of channels we have now. If you don't
Absolutely.
in the first couple of seconds, you're dead.
Yeah. And I think one of the big mistakes that people fall into, the trap that people fall into, is treating communication like it's after everything else. It comes after everything else. It's a promotion.
Yes.
But if we treat communication as fundamentally part of that upper level business strategy, and we specifically understand, as you said, what it is that we're doing and who we're doing it for and why we're doing it, the communication falls into place and it's no longer an afterthought. And it shouldn't be an afterthought, because when we actually really want to connect with people, we want to make them feel something. Because when you feel something about a brand or about a person, that's going to be remembered long, long after, maybe the picture on the social media post or whatever it is. It's how something makes you feel. And if you get that right from your upper level business strategy, you don't really have to worry so much about your afterwards promotions and marketing, because that all falls into place. That comes very naturally. Because we look very much at, for example, who are we talking to? And if we know that fundamentally as part of our business strategy, we're going to know those people in terms of what they read, what they listen to, what their needs are, what their fears are.
Yes.
All of those sorts of things. And we're going to be communicating with them based on that, rather than thinking, well, how do we make this work in a social media post and what should we put in it, where it's treated like an afterthought. So that's so important to not fall into that trap, to think, okay, well, we've got everything else done. Now let's look at what we do with our marketing or our communication.
Yeah,
Let's not treat it like a promotion.
that's very true. And I think one of the biggest issues when someone becomes self-employed initially is they're looking at it from a cash flow perspective. I need to create sales in order to get revenue, in order to keep going. And the trouble is, we forget about communication, but if we can't explain our business, then we can't get referred. And, I've been speaking quite a bit over the last number of weeks about clarity and chaos. And, if you don't have clarity, you create chaos. And without chaos, you end up with a lack of focus. And if you want to be referred, then, you need clarity. You need people to have confidence in what you do, but they also need to hear that in simplistic terms. It can't be something over the top where people aren't going to understand it. So clarity, confidence, and simplicity are probably three of the things that a good communication strategy presents as a business owner as they're starting out. And indeed, when they get to that point where clarity is beginning to shift back into chaos, when they might be 3 or 4 or 5 years owning a business, and then things start to move off track. I think if you've got that strong communication strategy, it will keep you on track, and it'll keep you, I suppose, on that journey to that vision that myself and Dad talk about all the time.
You're so right. I would agree with that. And certainly when I'm working with my clients on that basis, it's like, as you said there with your cash flow, how many business owners would go into their business and start working on their business and say, okay, well, I've got this plan in mind. I'll check the cash flow in another 12 months. I'll check the statements. I'll check my books in another 12 months. I'll come back to it when I have time, because right now I'm so busy doing all of these other things, either making the product or dealing with, suppliers or what have you. So I don't have time to look at the books. I'll come back to that later. Well, of course not. we're constantly coming back to our books to make sure that things are aligned and things are working well so we can keep the show on the road. Communication is exactly the same. Those two things are inextricably linked, because if you're not able to communicate effectively, it creates chaos in the books. So I always do say to my clients, let's come back and review that. You might have, for example, let's say we have a 12-month strategy. It's really important to come back at certain particular points that are identified at the beginning of the strategy and say, okay, we're going to come back every 4 weeks or every 8 weeks, maybe it's every 12 weeks, and we're going to measure our success, because sometimes markets change, environments change, people's needs change. There might be a new channel that people are using to communicate.
Yeah.
And we can't rely on the fact that what we decided to do 3 months ago is going to be exactly the same today. And that's the same when, you're looking at any type of planning scenario. So it's really important that you don't look at set and forget, that you think about coming back and measuring where you're at with your communication and your audiences and the impact, how that's going.
I have found as well, guys, of late, that I had one client and their team insisted that they advertise in a local paper, so we say county-wide, okay? And they spent over 3 grand, so €3,000, got into some paper advertising. Now, it's not the fault of the paper. The paper or radio, they want you to be successful and they want their medium to be successful. But if you don't feed them with the right information, it's impossible. And so they spent that 3,000 and they were complaining to me that they got absolutely nada out of their advertising. But we looked at it and it was like something you do 20 years ago. Put up an
Yeah,
ad
okay.
and feel free to call us on 08 whatever, right? And absolutely landed nowhere. But that's
Mm.
3 grand without
Such a shame.
thought.
Yeah.
And like what I've learned this morning, it just my aha moment, listen to you, Karissa, is that communication should be at the start of the process. Especially as well, new businesses with either a new product or a new service. They are going to appeal to the early adapters first. It's like 14%. And then you have the early adapters, then it goes into the early majority. They won't do anything unless proof of concept, until the early adapters use it first. But what I was trying to explain to my client, that 3 grand they spent on a local newspaper was actually not the early adapters. It was not even the early majority. It was the late majority. The only way a late majority type of person buys from you is if you're Coca-Cola and everyone knows it's out there, and they really had a costly aha moment. I don't care.
Oh, yeah.
3 grand is 3 grand,
Absolutely. Yeah, that's such a shame. And this is the thing, is understanding that sometimes the newspaper or the radio, or dare I say it, a social media channel may not be where your audience is. So spending that money before fundamentally understanding who your audience is, what they read, what they're listening to, who they're speaking to, all of those sorts of questions that we ask about audience. Was the newspaper, was the radio even right for them? And, as you say, very, very kind of costly aha moment, and such a shame, because that is such a lot of money, that you can do so much better with if it's actually targeted in the right way.
Of course, that has further effects, because a pure communication strategy in that instance, it doesn't just affect sales, but suddenly it starts to bring in sort of scope creep, or endless back and forth or
Mm.
misunderstood expectations on the part of the business. And then that leads to a frustrated team. And when that happens, then, you find that you're probably working more, you're earning less, and there's
That's so true.
lots of chaos uh, around
Yeah.
around the business.
That's
Getting it right and understanding, number one, your target audience, and then that route to target audience. And as you say, it may not be the local newspaper, it could have been a totally different strategy indeed.
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
that is so true. Then that I've noticed lately, the pipeline for your business, right? I was guilty myself as well. Always thought the pipeline was where you introduce people to your business and they go down through a filter, they become a client in some different levels. But of recent times, the pipeline is actually more importantly a filter, and making sure that the right type of client for you comes into that pipeline. Because what happens is just what you're after saying then, that it creates pandemonium. If you get the wrong client, we're all guilty of it. If you get the wrong type of client in from the start. I know another company in the pharma world, and so they'd meet people with new ideas all the time, right? But they had no process at the start of it. And what they ended up was, after 12 months, they were out about 100 grand, because people would come in with really fancy ideas and with no structure or no payment system. Okay, if you have a fancy idea, okay, come in and we'll examine it for you. We'll do all the whatever that has to be done. But have skin in the game. We need to get paid to do that. And they didn't have a process at the start. So in other words, they were creating a pipeline for the sake of creating a pipeline, not a filter. 100 grand, just like that.
Yeah, unreal. I love that, and I think that's actually a real aha moment as well, is when a self-employed understand that not everybody is your client. Not everybody is a potential customer. And even if you think, okay, well, I'm going after this particular segment and that's my target audience, is everybody in that particular segment going to be your customer? No. And using that pipeline as the filter is incredibly important, can save you a lot of heartache and obviously dollars, as you've pointed out, but a lot of heartache, because that can be very demoralizing as well and create that chaos that Dan was talking about.
And what I find a lot, Dan, I'm not sure whether you come across it or Carissa, but you find business owners who undercharge, over-explain, and apologize for their price because they can't articulate the value of their business, and they can't articulate their value to the point, where everybody is clear about what it is the offer is, the values. And we talk so much about, aligning what you do and why you do it, along with your values, with the type of customers that you're and clients that you're looking for. And I'm sure, Carissa, when you're dealing with some of your clients, you'd come across that they're being unable to articulate, the true value of what it is they offer.
Definitely. And I'd add one other word in there, well, in addition to what you had said, is differentiation.
Yes.
What makes that service or product different from everybody else's? Maybe it's a particular way that a product is made or delivered, or is it about you personally and the way you deliver a service? But whatever that differentiation is, no product is the same, regardless of what it is. You may have two products that are the same, but the way it's delivered is going to be different. So that's inextricably linked as well into your positioning and thinking about what that differentiation is helps position you in the market. And we work a lot of that on a lot of that in my business, and helping people understand what makes them different so that they can really articulate that value in that way.
Yeah, I've always said, Carissa, totally agree with you. You know, if you're in a price war with your competitor, it means you have failed to create an understanding of why people are paying you more than your competitor. Because if you don't, you're now in a price war.
Mhm.
And I think that's very, very, very important. When we're going through our work on a daily basis, there is one massive question that I ask clients is, if your organization didn't exist tomorrow, what would the world miss?
That's a great question. I love that.
Yeah, and it stumbles them, every one of them. They, give me a real intelligent, what? And they they really have to think it through. And I go, what? But then, though, if they work at it and we work together on answering the question, there's light bulbs all over the place. You should not be in a price war.
Absolutely. It's a race to the bottom that way, isn't it? An absolute race to the bottom, and it's demoralizing. And, it leaves you asking, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And, that's not why anyone goes into business for themselves, and it's really about being able to, as you say, being able to articulate that difference and what the world will miss, because that's why you go into business, is to make a difference, whether it's to your own life and future, or to your customers, or whatever it is. But it's so important to get that right.
Fantastic. Guys, the last 23 minutes have absolutely flown with the podcast this morning on communication. We'd like to thank Karissa for being with us today. And if you're listening to this, here's something that you can do this week. Answer these 3 questions. Who do I help? What problem do I solve? And most importantly, why do I do it? And here's what's key. Keep it simple. Don't be clever. Don't overcomplicate, and keep it clear. Again, thanks to Karissa being here. If you want any further
Thanks.
information about what Karissa does, you can find her on the web at clarity360.ie.
Thank you. That's it. I'm also available on LinkedIn. You're all welcome to connect. So we have a chat that way too.
Okay, thanks for being here today. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Brilliant. Thank you, gents. Have a great week.